Hudson Yards, also known as the Clinton area of Manhattan, contains small portions of more widely known neighborhoods, Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. The Hudson Yards neighborhood covers 1/2 mile radius, with the Hudson Rail Yard located within its focal point. The area boundaries and surrounding impact zones are defined by 8th Avenue to the east, all the way to the Henry Hudson River, and mid-blocks from 28th Street to the south and 48th Street to the north. The West Side Yard is also known as the Kammerer West Side Yard, a namesake it received from the late Brooklynite and New York State Senator John Kammerer, who helped to obtain $195.7 million for its initial construction in 1987. The site has been a hotbed for proposed developments like a possible stadium for the New York Yankees, New York Jets, or village site for the 2012 Summer Olympics. At this time, the site is used to store commuter rail trains operated by the Long Island Railroad, and the 26.17-acre yard that sits between 30th Street and West 33rd Street on 10th and 11th Avenues has come a long way. As we can see, the demographics of Hudson Yards easily shows that while the neighborhood once consisted of poor Hispanic, Black, Polish, and Irish immigrants, much has changed since the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. In this neighborhood, currently residents of Hudson Yards have an average household income of $118,650. It is a clear reflection of the commercial development and now influx of wealthier and more influential persons into this once desolate, factory-laden neighborhood. Hudson Yards is known for the James A. Farley Post Office across the street from Madison Square Garden. The Lincoln Tunnel is a major entry point for all persons crossing the West Hudson River. The Javits Center, which has over 675,000 square feet of commercial space, and the Port Authority Bus Terminal at 42nd Street is a major transportation hub for people working and living in Manhattan. But who lives in the middle of a transportation hub? On the west side of Manhattan? I do, with my son, and we moved to Hudson Yards in 2010. Before, we lived in Co-op City in the Bronx, approximately an hour-and-a-half ride by school bus into Manhattan for my son. So we moved into this quiet neighborhood for access to the school on the west side and resources we could both use for work and for school. However, since we moved into the Clinton district, changes have quickly begun and are changing the full authenticity of Hudson Yards. What were once low-income residences within the district are now becoming very high-value market-rate apartment buildings and commercial spaces. My building is located at the corner of 37th Street and 10th Avenue. It is a mixed residential building with 836 apartments, most of which are market rate, starting at $2,800 for a studio and upwards. There are a handful of low or middle income apartments located within it. It used to be a public school. PS 127 to be exact, stood in the very same place where this now very high income residential building stands. While the neighborhood around my building is quickly changing, Hudson Yards still holds much of the history, as you can see from my apartment window in 2010. Developers have started to build around the long-standing tenement buildings in the neighborhood, including the Port Authority, which was built in 1950. The following are historical place markers of the neighborhood known as the Special Clinton District, or Hudson Yards. Named after former mayor and governor of New York, DeWitt Clinton is where the neighborhood Clinton retains its name from. Notice the former L train above 9th Avenue, where the cowboys, who used to lead the freight out of the meatpacking district and up along the Hudson River, would ride along uptown and downtown in the 1920s and 30s. The neighborhood has always been cast in the shadow of the Empire State Building, which broke ground in March of 1930. The industrial era proved profitable for the tower and the Hudson Yards neighborhood, because the yards, as they grew so quickly, became known for as a place where shipments came in from all over the world and were delivered into the heart of Manhattan. For a very long time, Hudson Yards was undesirable because of its far western location on the island of Manhattan. But in 2003, property developers like Related and Brookfield Properties had other plans in mind for the Western Rail Yard. It has been coined the Hudson Yards Redevelopment Project, and it is estimated to cost approximately $20 billion for the redevelopment plan. I found documentation outlining rezoning, which took place in 2005, and the full scope of the plan and the future of Hudson Yards. First, there was the extension of the 7 train line, which now comes from Times Square 42nd Street to 34th Street in between 10th and 11th Avenues, and will drive traffic towards the center of the district, the Javits Center, and the heart of the future development site. Brookfield Properties has also broken ground on a $17 million square foot mixed-use but private real estate development, one of the largest since the development of Rockefeller Center. It'll be called Manhattan West. The 62-story tower at 31st Street in between 9th and 10th Avenues has been a point of contention for the community and the community board to tackle. Getting the community and future tenants like L'Oreal, Coach, Time Warner, SAP, and VaynerMedia to agree on proper use for public space has been very difficult. In 2015, there was also the extension of Highline Park up to 34th Street and 11th Avenue. Local delegates and some community members have pushed for the development projects to their own benefit. In 1/2 mile, property developers like Extel Developers, Related Properties, Oxford, TF Cornerstone, and Brookfield Properties have all broken ground on large-scale development projects affecting the air quality, traffic, and quality of life for people like myself living in the heart of the yards. But who will represent us before we are all pushed out? Members of Community Board 4 review almost every land use agreement that comes into the neighborhood. But there are many churches and advocacy groups for persons of lower income who have no voice or representation in any of the development projects.
Showing the current condition. The next slide shows a site plan of the proposed building. Again, there are 2 building segments, one on West 43rd, one on West 44th Street. The land use actions that we were here for.
Who will represent us? Will it be the Hudson Yards and Hell's Kitchen Alliance Business Improvement District? Will they fairly represent the tenants who make the history of the neighborhood and what it is today? Will the renaming of the neighborhood and city streets to Hudson Boulevard or Hudson Park and Boulevard represent the people who used to live in the neighborhood or the people that used to work in the neighborhood? Or will it represent the property developers? The fight for space has already begun. So maybe our local delegates, like Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, will represent us, and our needs for affordable housing, transportation, and sustainable resources.
And I hope you will all join us. I do think that the city is looking for input. I just came from Board 7. They are having a similar discussion, and it's really important to have these discussions. I will just say one more thing about senior housing that I don't know the answer to, but I'm not sure I like this, which is the idea of what certainly should be permanent, but what kind of senior housing? And there's a big.
Who will get a fair cut of the resources coming to Hudson Yards? My hopes are that the residents, churches, local organizations, and shopkeepers in Hudson Yards do not lose ground and can save the history of Hudson Yards as we once knew it and as we will once know it in the future.